The story kicks off with Leary handing over a bag of money to the broker for the gigolo. She asks if it's enough to monopolize him, and he assures her it is. With a grin, he tells her to enjoy herself. As she strolls down the hallway, her body tingles strangely. She remembers him saying he's waiting at the end, but she pauses, questioning if this is really the right thing to do. Then she reminds herself that her husband literally suggested she get a lover, so technically, she's just following instructions, right? She shrugs, takes a deep breath, and pushes open the door. Inside, other women turn to look at her. One of them asks who she is, but she raises her voice, declaring she heard the best gigolo was here. A voice from the corner says she's finally here. She doesn't say anything back, but in her mind, she tells herself that if she's going down this road, it's only because her husband's idea of marriage opened that door, not because she planned it this way. Meanwhile, Luise stands in front of a mirror, adjusting her dress with the help of a maid. She asks if the outfit looks good and wonders if Laird would like it. Then, the sound of a carriage reaches her ears. Her eyes widen. She rushes outside, calling his name like she's running a marathon in heels. The maid tells her to be careful, but she's already halfway to the gate. When she finally reaches him, she hugs him and says she missed him, asking if anything exciting happened while he was at the estate. It hasn't been that long since the wedding, but he had to stay away for months. He greets her, then turns to open the carriage door like he's unveiling a surprise. A young lady steps down, and he calmly introduces her as a new maid. Luise stares, thinking, wait a minute, what kind of maid looks like that? The girl bows and asks her to please take care of her. That night, while lying in bed, she replays everything in her head. Laird had said the girl's luggage got stolen on the way to the capital, and she needed a place to stay, so he invited her to stay at their house for a while. Luise wonders if she's just overthinking it. The maid did say she was only looking for her family and would leave as soon as she found them. That story kind of touched her. It reminded her of her younger self. Her thoughts drift to that one painful memory. The day she dropped her fish on the floor. She needed to sell them, and if they were scratched, they'd lose value. So she tried to gather them quickly but got stung in the process. Then Laird showed up, asked if she was okay, and told her he'd pay for all the fish. He even said if she got hurt, she should let him know. Thinking back, she realizes how tough life had been and how that moment changed things. Laird's the kind of guy who helps people without a second thought. Maybe this new maid is just another person he's trying to help. She decides she'll treat the girl kindly. After all, if she's really planning to leave soon, what's the harm? But then, just as she looks out the window, her heart drops. She sees something she can't unsee. Laird and the maid. In the garden. Getting a little too close. Her mind freezes. What is she looking at? At dinner, they sit at the table, but she's not really present. He notices and asks what she's thinking about. She fakes a smile and just nods. He says he's tired and that she should eat since he made sure to order the things she likes. She keeps smiling, but inside, it's chaos. He's acting so normal, so friendly, like nothing's happened. Did she imagine it? Is it possible she got it all wrong? Maybe the maid made a mistake and Laird was just caught up in it. But no. What she saw was real. That wasn't just a friendly conversation in the garden. Her thoughts are spinning, trying to find any logical explanation. Is he tired of her already? She remembers how he always used to say he loved her. Suddenly, the maid walks in, saying the Count, yep, Laird, called her. Luise immediately calls out to him and asks how he could do something like that. She says she's loved him all this time. He looks at her calmly and says she's the one he loves the most. Then he adds that they should respect each other's privacy and that he should be free to enjoy his life however he wants. Privacy? Freedom? She's stunned. Those exact words were in the contract he wanted her to sign before they got married. She stares at him while he smiles and asks if she understands what he means. Inside, she wonders if that's what he meant all along. He holds her hands and asks if she remembers the contract, the one that clearly said if she interferes in his private life, the marriage ends. She freezes, shocked by how serious he is. In her mind, she knows she has no other option. She doesn't want to return to that miserable life, not again. She thinks about how he reached out to her during the darkest time, how he was the only one who saw her then. She softly says she understands. He hugs her and thanks her for being so understanding, like he just got promoted for saying the worst thing with the calmest voice. After that day, he's still just as kind. He brings her a red flower, saying it's her favorite and it reminds him of her. She's surprised he even remembers that, and she says thank you. He tells her he brought Helena along. Helena, smiling like she's the new queen of the castle, asks if she got in trouble again. She calmly replies that she's fine, but in her heart, she wonders how fast these women change. Honestly, she's lost count. But she's been adapting in her own quiet way, like someone learning to live with a parade going on in the living room. As he leaves the dining room, he casually asks if she's okay with his mistress. She tells him of course not, after all, she's still the real wife. Then she adds that she's only asking just in case. Just like that, 3 years pass. 2 maids working in the garden whisper while trimming plants. One says it's getting a little too late for the succession talk. The other replies that with the Marquis always wandering off, it's not helping. She adds that if this keeps going and someone ends up having a child out of nowhere, the lady might have to step down. She overhears them and feels a tight pain in her chest. Later at dinner, she looks at him and finally asks if it isn't time to talk about having a successor. He looks up, clearly surprised, and asks if that's really necessary. She says that if things keep going the way they are, she might lose her place. He answers that he just wants them to be happy like this. She blinks, wondering quietly if she's actually happy. He gets up and says he has an appointment. Before leaving, he asks if there's anything she wants to talk about. She hesitates, then says it's nothing. As he walks away, she stares at his back, whispering to herself that today is their wedding anniversary. She doesn't feel like going anywhere, but the silence of the mansion feels heavier than usual. She steps outside, hoping a walk will help, but everything still feels empty. Then, out of nowhere, it starts raining. She sighs, wondering why the sky just decided to cry with her. She thinks maybe it's better to stay inside. Deep down, she knows this relationship isn't going to magically improve. Her mind drifts to that one moment when he was chatting with a friend. The friend had asked if his wife wasn't aware of his behavior, clearly surprised she hadn't caused a storm. He casually said she knew, but wouldn't say anything. The friend laughed, saying he used to be worried when he said he'd get married, but now he thinks he's a genius. He told him no wife is more convenient. The friend even said he should have done the same, find a quiet girl from a small family and marry her. Back in the present, she tells herself again, he's never going to change. She walks slowly, asking if there's still any way for her to be happy. At some point, she realizes she's just been walking with no direction, the rain soaking her clothes. Her teeth start chattering, and that's when she snaps out of it. It's freezing. She says it out loud like her body didn't already know. She looks around and notices she might have gone too far. Nothing familiar is in sight. Then she sees a house. Her face lights up as she thanks the heavens. She rushes over and opens the door. Inside, she sees a man sitting down, badly injured and looking like he's given up. She hurries to him and asks if he's okay. He doesn't speak. She wonders why there's so much blood, and without thinking, she starts giving him first aid. She tries to expose the wound so she can see what's going on, her mind racing with possibilities. Just then, he suddenly grabs her wrist and asks who she is. He holds her wrist firmly and asks who sent her, eyes sharp even in his weak state. She panics a bit, tells him to calm down, but he's already dizzy. The more he tries to stay awake, the more his vision fades. Just like that, he collapses on her. She yells for him to wake up, voice shaky. Later that night, he slowly opens his eyes. Confused, he sees a silver-haired woman beside him. She looks oddly familiar. When she notices he's awake, she turns and asks if he's back to his senses. He doesn't reply. They both just stare at each other like a silent staring contest. He tries to sit up but winces in pain. She calmly explains that she only gave him a quick first aid and that thankfully, the wound wasn't as deep as it looked. He quietly wonders if a lady really just treated him like that. She tells him she had no tools, so she did what she could on the spot. He thinks the treatment is surprisingly good, even better than most knights he knows. He notices her clothes, ripped and stained with blood, and asks if she tore her petticoat to treat him. She nods, saying there wasn't much choice. He's stunned, thinking not many women would do that, especially not someone who looks like she comes from a prestigious background. When he smiles at her, she asks why he's grinning and tells him to stop laughing before the wound opens again. He chuckles and says he gets it. Then thanks her, saying he survived because of her, and apologizes for earlier. She says the treatment bill is now covered, and she has to leave. He's surprised and asks if she's really going already. She says yes, her husband should be home soon. He tries to sit up again and asks if she's not curious about why he was in such a state. She simply says everyone has their circumstances and that today she did something she's never done before, so she'd like him to keep it a secret too. She leaves quickly. He lies back and thinks funny enough, he was just about to ask her to do the same. Then wonders, who on earth was she? On her way home, she thinks about how familiar he looked. At the house, he mentions hearing from the servants that she came in drenched with torn clothes. He asks what happened. She tells him she didn't expect the rain and it came down too hard. He seems irritated and asks how a noble could come back in that state, then apologizes, wondering if it's because he forgot their anniversary. He says she could have just talked to him instead of falling sick. He asks if she's hurt anywhere, says he'd feel bad if she got sick. She notices his scent, it doesn't smell like him. Someone else's perfume? He stands up, says thankfully she's okay, and reminds her there's an important banquet tomorrow. He clearly forgot. Then casually mentions that if a certain noble returns, it'll shake the whole social circle. The name rings in her ears. He continues talking, saying no knight has returned from a mission in the peril for a long time and more than half of the men died this time. That's when she realizes the injured man she treated was none other than the Archduke. The very same man, the fallen crown prince, who disappeared a year ago during a reconnaissance mission in the peril. That place, cursed since the dragon's death 30 years ago, filled with strange beasts and darker secrets. Everyone thought he was being sent to die. Most of the knights never returned. People whispered that it was the emperor's way of getting rid of him. But he survived. After 21 years, he saved half of his men and came back alive. She wonders what he was doing there and why she had to be the one to find him. He calls her name again, asking if she's even listening. She snaps out of her thoughts and says sorry. He warns her about the Archduke, says there are rumors that he charms women, even noble ladies and married ones, and uses them for black magic. He tells her she's wise, so she wouldn't get caught up with someone like that. She agrees with a nod. She thinks the rumor has nothing to do with her. She's only crossed paths with him a few times at banquets. That rainy night was the first time she really saw him. There's no way there would be any real connection between them. At the banquet, he proudly introduces her to the Archduke. The man greets her and says, "So this is the famous Countess." There's a pause. The two lock eyes for a moment longer than necessary. Her husband notices and wonders quietly to himself, what kind of look was that? His Majesty congratulates the Archduke for returning safely. He bows and calls it a great honor. Then he jokingly asks why His Majesty went out of his way to throw such a grand banquet. The Emperor smiles, says it's only because he traveled such a long road under royal command, then adds that maybe it's all thanks to his good luck. But as he watches him closely, he quietly wonders why he looks so lively after hearing he suffered a serious injury just yesterday. He tells him to enjoy the banquet, while thinking to himself that he looks like someone who got a little too confident. He also thinks he's still the same old useless prince from before. The current emperor is his half-brother. Ever since he snatched the title of Crown Prince through shady tricks, he hasn't stopped sending assassins. But somehow, he always survives. He gathers loyal people, doesn't care about their status, and forms the strongest knights. Instead of fighting for power, he stays out of politics and builds influence through estate work and charity. The more good he does, the more nervous the emperor gets. That's why he sent him and his knights to peril, a place everyone expects no one to return from. But they did. Now the emperor's hatred burns stronger than ever. He glares across the room and thinks, let him enjoy this moment, because soon, he'll be the one to take him down. Later, he walks over to congratulate him. He greets him formally, calling him Count. He acts surprised to see him return from peril. The Archduke thanks him for coming and says it's an honor to be invited. But as soon as he sees the woman beside him, he freezes. That face, he saw it yesterday. She looks at him and tells herself not to panic. They already agreed to keep everything a secret. No reason to be nervous. Besides, her husband would flip if he found out. And she's not in the mood for another misunderstanding. He smiles and says, so this is the famous Countess. She smiles back politely, says it's an honor, then congratulates him on his safe return. He stares and wonders why she's acting like they've never met. Her husband, meanwhile, is getting a little uneasy. He notices the two of them and thinks, what's with this weird energy? Suddenly, someone calls his name from behind. He turns and there she is, Lillian, smiling sweetly. He says he's been waiting. Then proudly introduces her to the Archduke, saying she just entered society. She plays her part and congratulates the Archduke, adding it's such an honor to meet him up close. The Archduke raises an eyebrow. He asks that he should then tell him more about this lady Lillian. She blushes, acting shy. Meanwhile, the Countess is clearly uncomfortable. She excuses herself, saying she's not feeling too well. Lillian blinks, asks if she's really leaving. Her husband looks at her, says she shouldn't overdo it and asks if she needs someone to escort her. But she notices he's still holding Lillian's hand. What more is there to say? She calmly tells him she'll go alone. He nods, says it's fine. But then the Archduke suddenly speaks up and offers to escort her. Everyone stares in surprise. Her husband blinks and says this is the first time he's ever seen the Archduke offer to escort someone. He replies that, well, he has other things to handle too. She thanks him for the kindness but declines. Says it'll be easier to go alone. Her husband agrees, and she takes her leave. The Duke just nods like it's no big deal. Lillian turns and says she and her husband should leave as well. Outside, two men block a young guy from coming in. They sneer, saying someone with a wandering background doesn't belong here. One even jokes that he looks like a lieutenant, and it suits him. He stays calm, tells them to step aside or they'll block the entrance. They smirk and ask if he's going to seduce them by force. He sighs and thinks to himself he should have stayed home. Who knew the social world still had this kind of drama? Just then, she walks up and sees them. She wonders if it's a fight or just another round of bullying. She's in a hurry but still considers stepping in. Then she spots the guy being blocked. Her eyes widen, it's Max Ion. Without thinking, she calls out his name. He hears his name and looks up, surprised, then quickly smiles and calls hers. She laughs a little and says it's been years, and she's glad to see him. He asks how she ended up there. She says she's married now and has been living in the capital for 3 years. The two men who stopped him earlier ask if they know each other. She casually tells them they grew up together. He thanks her for stepping in and says he didn't expect his childhood friend to become the famous Countess. He asks how she's doing. She asks if he's still the vice captain under the royal order, then adds she's heard good things about him lately. She figures he must have been to peril. Then quietly asks how things are back home. He says everything's fine. She wonders if he visited. He says he did, and he was surprised not to find her there. She tells him to visit their mansion properly next time and says her husband would welcome him. She insists again that he should come. then asks if he's doing okay. Before he can answer, someone calls out. It's him. He says he was worried but found him chatting with Madame Cloette. Then turns to her and says, just to be clear, he didn't follow her, he's only here for Maxion. She blinks and asks what he's talking about, then says she should head off. She watches his movements, then tells him not to make sudden ones like that, it's bad for his injury. He thinks to himself who cares, then looks at her and says first she acts like a stranger, now she's suddenly worried. She doesn't respond. Instead, she turns to Maxion and says he better write to her. He nods with a smile and promises he will. He then asks Maxion if they've always been close. He nods and says since childhood, and he had no idea the Count's wife was a friend of his. Then he gets a bit nosy and asks if something's going on with her. He quickly says no, aside from what he said earlier. Then he changes the subject and tells him they should go say goodbye to the boring folks, that their achievement deserves a bit more noise. She watches from a distance and wonders if he's following her again. Just to be safe, she picks up the pace and hurries off. Later, the two of them are playing chess. Maxion asks if something's bothering him. He says no, but the game says otherwise. Maxion wins again. He sighs and says there are days like this, then compliments him for improving. Maxion grins and says he didn't improve, it just feels like someone's not focused today. He admits it and asks if he's off duty tomorrow. He says yes and confirms he's planning to visit the Cloette mansion. He nods, then casually asks if anything unusual has come up in her recent activities. Maxion says no, everything's been normal. He asks what he remembers about the Count's wife. Maxion pauses and says that's tough, it's been 10 years. He tells him to say anything, even small things. Maxion thinks and says she's always been warm. Then adds, awkwardly, that there's a weird resemblance between her and him. He blinks and thinks wow, if people heard that, they'd faint. Maxion tells him to pretend he didn't hear it. He then tells him not to let his guard down just because he's happy to see her again. That her family is known for loyalty, even within the Imperial side. He watches Maxion smile and thinks he never expected to see that look on his face. Maxion says it's all right and stands to leave. He tells him next time, they'll have a proper match. Maxion leaves, but wonders why he's suddenly asking questions about her. He, on the other hand, sits there thinking what is going on. During his time in peril, the Emperor kept sending assassins. But oddly, some attacks came from volunteer soldiers. And on the final day of the mission, someone close to him betrayed him. That's when she appeared. He starts to wonder, is she part of the Imperial faction? Reports say she doesn't fit into society. Just a noble wife with nothing remarkable, but he remembers the way she treated his injury. That wasn't something just anyone could do. That speed, that skill, was it from practice? Has she done that many times before? Why is someone like that around Laird? Is something being planned behind the scenes? Based on her reactions, he starts to believe she realized who he was later on. So now he wonders, did she ask him to keep it secret just to hide her location? He leans back, eyes narrowed, and quietly says to himself, "What are you, Luise Cloette?" She gets dressed with help from her maid, who tells her she heard a guest is coming today. The maid suggests something more comfortable but is politely ignored. She just says it's fine like this, then smiles to herself, thinking about the old days. The moment she hears he's arrived, she rushes out. He's just getting off his horse. She seems genuinely happy to see him. He thanks her for the invite. She says she's more thankful that he came and jokes that there are tons of stories she's been saving up. She brings out apple pie, saying she wasn't sure what he liked now, so she just made what he always used to eat. He takes a bite and says it's delicious. She lights up and tells him he's grown a lot, it's like dealing with a big kid now. He tells her to stop teasing, but she laughs and says there's plenty more to eat, so he better get to it. She asks how he ended up in the Royal Knights. He says he met the Archduke on the road to his hometown and somehow ended up hired as his driver. She says it's good to hear and that he looks much better than he did back in peril. He laughs, says he's happy now and was also happy back then. Then asks how she's been. She says she's lucky to have met a good man and thanks God for it. Then she says they shouldn't just sit around, the garden is beautiful and she wants to show him. They walk through it, and he says it looks like it's about to rain. She shrugs and says it won't last, and there's a place to take cover anyway. He says she must know the weather better than the forecast does. She thinks to herself even if it rains, she's still going to enjoy this walk. Just like old times, some things never change. Then it starts drizzling. She tries to open her umbrella but it won't budge. She calls for help. He comes over and covers her with his. She asks why hers won't work. He says it's probably broken. She sighs but doesn't seem too mad. He tells her to come closer and they share his umbrella. She looks thrilled. She says the rain's picking up and grabs his hand, suggesting they make a run for it. They run through the garden like a scene straight out of a storybook. By the time they get under the building, she's a little out of breath but smiling. She says it feels like being a kid again. Then she notices his clothes are wet and apologizes, but he says it's fine, he had fun. He reminds her she once said it's nice being here. She agrees, saying the place has its own charm. He then asks if Master Grimm is still in the capital. She quietly says no, he passed away. He looks stunned and asks when. She says 5 years ago. He says he should have stayed. She comforts him, saying he couldn't have known and what matters is that they're meeting now. He says it must have been hard. She nods and says it really was. He mentions that with Laird beside her, things must have been okay. She suddenly goes quiet. He calls her name gently. She finally says when she left Peril, she thought she was escaping a prison. But this place feels like a prettier one. Everything's a mess, and what scares her the most is that she might be the one to ruin the peace. He sees the tears fall and gently says her name again. Meanwhile, Archduke Lindemann is getting into a carriage. The driver asks where they're headed. He says to the Count Cloet's mansion. The driver nods. Inside the carriage, he thinks to himself that close relationships make it hard to stay objective. So he needs to see everything with his own eyes. Then tells the driver they're going to pick up Max Ion too. He's about to leave when she tells him to go back safely. He nods and says he had fun today, then adds that if anything happens, she should write to him. She agrees. Just as he's heading out, someone walks into the house. Both of them freeze a little. The new arrival says he didn't expect her childhood friend to be such a strong man. She quickly introduces him as her old friend. He smiles and says it's nice to meet him, adds that he was just about to leave but is glad they met. The other man says it's a shame he's leaving right when he arrived and suggests they have a meal together next time. He agrees and heads out toward his ride. She tells him again it was fun and waves goodbye. But then they spot another carriage approaching. He asks if she invited someone else. She says no. The carriage stops, the door opens, and out steps someone that makes everyone's eyebrows raise. He drops a good evening, like it's no big deal. Then turns to his loyal knight and says he came to pick him up. She looks confused. He explains he thought it might rain again, and since he was nearby, he decided to stop by. Adds that it always bothers him when his guy rides on horseback like he's still in training. She just nods, but thinks to herself that the rain's over and only someone who doesn't know the weather would say that. Deep down, she's wishing he hadn't shown up, especially because someone might get upset if they find out about that last time. Then he casually mentions that on the way in, he saw a beautiful garden and asks if he'll be invited next time. She's lost for words. The other man steps in quickly and says the place might be a little shabby, but they'll try to save a room for him. He laughs and says he'll look forward to it, then wishes them a peaceful night. Later that night, she's in her room when the air shifts. He asks her if she really had to go out with vulgar people. She calmly replies that her friend isn't vulgar, he's her friend. But in his mind, it's not just the friend, it's also the surprise appearance of someone with more titles than manners. He points out that while the guy might be her childhood buddy, is still a knight who used to be a mercenary, and she's now a countess. She asks if that's really how it works now. Her thoughts jump to the past, specifically their wedding. He had told her that day she was now a noblewoman and should forget her old name, said he didn't want people to look down on her, and warned her not to talk about where she came from. Back in the moment, she thinks maybe she and her friend embarrassed him, and he doesn't care about how she feels. It's just unfair. But out loud, she tells him that if it bothers him so much, she'll avoid her friend. He says good, and adds that he wouldn't mind if it were just a passing fling. In fact, if she's that bored, she might as well find a lover and distress. She freezes. In her head, she tells herself to stay calm. No point breaking the peace herself. So she agrees. Fine, she'll get a lover. Meanwhile, the two men are in a sitting room. One of them is reading a letter and suddenly exclaims. The other asks if something's wrong. He says her husband told her to get a lover. He asks what her reply was. He says she's wondering where to find one, and even said she prefers handsome ones. Then adds that she's not the type to randomly pick someone, so no, he won't be applying. He says he wanted to tell her to ignore her husband, but that's their private issue. Still, he's worried. She's bold enough to actually wander into the back alley to find one, and that's a bit scary. The other man smirks and asks, "What about you?" He blinks. "What about me?" He clarifies. "You be the lover." He chokes a bit and asks if he's serious. He then gets a question back. "Do you think I am not worthy of competition?" Now he's really lost. He wants to know why. The answer? Because I'm bored. Back at the mansion, she receives a letter. The maid hands it over and leaves. She opens it. Inside it says, "Dear Luise, sorry for that whole awkward lover conversation. I've been thinking, I know the best kind of man for the job. Someone charming. Someone reliable. Someone who might actually keep you entertained." He asks what he means by being bored. The reply is that all his territory work is done, he's back from peril, and now he's planning a deep investigation into the Cloet family. He raises a brow and asks if that's really the reason. The answer? Curiosity about what kind of person she is. He warns that it's too risky to become her lover just to dig into her family. But the other man shrugs and says he'll do his best to survive. He then brings up the time he came back injured. The response is that he didn't know betrayal was coming. He shakes his head and says he still left even after knowing betrayal was likely. He thinks it's his fault. He wasn't a good enough subordinate. One of the men under him had sisters in the Imperial Hospital, yet still didn't abandon his duty. On that day, His Majesty intentionally left the residence to avoid his escort. He got himself cut by a traitor's blade and used his own blooded sword on purpose. That way, both his soldiers and the sisters would be safe. He wonders how he even managed to take down the traitor. He could have punished him earlier. While drowning in those thoughts, he hears a voice pull him back. The question is if he was really that bad. He quickly says that's not what he meant. Then gets handed the task of writing that ridiculous letter. It's said to be better than letting her end up with some alley gigolo. He's told to write that the Dolores Inn has the best ones and the most charming guy is named Elysian. When she reads the letter, she's confused. How does he know so much about gigolos? She wonders if he's interested in men. Maybe he's hiding something? She decides to play dumb until he confesses something. She's not even sure she can pull off the whole lover thing. Meanwhile, someone's been waiting at Dolores Inn for days. She hasn't shown up, and he's starting to question his life choices. He remembers the first time he saw her, 3 years ago. He'd heard that Count Cloet had married, and was curious. She was beautiful, yes. But he didn't know her family background. That banquet 3 years ago pops into his mind. She picked up a piece of cake to eat. That's when she realized everyone was staring. She panicked, wondering what she did wrong. What she didn't know was that the food was only for decoration. The noble crowd was horrified. Meanwhile, he just thought the whole custom was dumb. He watched her, curious at first. But after seeing her quietly fade into the background at every event, he got bored. She didn't really fit in. And eventually, he forgot about her. Now, here he is, days deep in waiting, wearing a face mask like his undercover at a masquerade ball. He even thinks the rumors about him are going to get spicier after this. When a maid asks if he wants tea, he agrees. She stares at his mask, thinking he's into weird games. Rumor already has it that he enjoys strange hobbies, avoids scandals, and might even dabble in dark magic. Some say he's scared of women. Others whisper about his unique tastes. He's admired and feared, but nobody really knows the truth. He, on the other hand, thinks this kind of drama is perfect. It might even rattle the imperial faction. Suddenly, she walks in. The maid asks if she came with someone. He stays quiet. She boldly says she's here for the country's best gigolo. The maid tries to correct her, but he waves her off and sends her away. He decides to mess with her a bit, so he changes his voice. Then he says she must be the Countess of Cloet. Asks if she's here looking for a cheating husband or just fed up with her nights. If that's the case, she's come to the right place. She calmly says no, she came for her lover. He repeats it like it's the wildest thing he's heard all week. He jokes that it's strange, she doesn't even want his body, just the title. Then asks, what's in it for him if he becomes her lover? She says he'll live a good life. He says that's still not enough. She tells him there's more. He gets closer and asks what that is. She looks at him, feeling like she's met him before. Says she'll do anything he wants. But something still feels familiar. He smiles and accepts the deal, then slowly removes the mask. Her eyes widen in shock. It's him. She stands up fast, says she's sorry, and tries to leave. In her mind, she's freaking out. Did he send her here on purpose? Were they in on it together? Before she can escape, he grabs her gently and tells her not to leave. Things are just about to get fun. She tells him it won't be fun for long, that he'll get bored. He says he'll decide that for himself. He points out that a person like her in a hotel, he didn't know she had this hobby too. She admits she's here to have a lover. He agrees, saying he'll be that lover. He asks if it's okay with her. She says she's not here to joke around. He reassures her he's sincere too, and smiles at her. She thinks for a moment, then stretches out her hand and says, "Have fun, my lover." He smiles, takes her hand, kisses it, and says he'll do his best to serve her as her lover. Later that night, she can't seem to calm down. She's going for a walk, wondering why she agreed to have Archduke Edward as a lover. It feels strange. She tells herself it's what Laird recommended, but still, it feels wrong, like she's cheating. As she walks down the stairs, she runs into Laird. She asks if he hasn't gone to sleep yet. He says it's a nice night after work, the moonlight is bright. He asks if she wants to have a drink with him since it's been a long time. She thinks to herself that his smile, which means so much to her, has saved her once again. She wonders if she can go back. She decides to go with him, remembering he once told her not to interfere with his private life. She worries that if she tells him about her lover, their relationship might end. She thinks maybe that's for the best. She tells him she just wants to take a walk around the mansion. He says that's nice, but warns her it's dark and she should be careful. She hopes this walk will help. She says good night to him, and he replies, "You too." The next day, she brings a lot of papers to Edward. He asks what they are. She tells him it's a contract. He says he knows, but asks why she's doing this. He wonders if she planned to prepare something like this. She says she doesn't know what to do with her lover, so she's trying this out first. She adds that one part of the contract says she won't get into any kind of relationship that a married couple would have. He tells her that won't happen unless she allows it, but if she wants it, she should let him know. She yells that it will never happen. He tells her that matters like this are decided through discussion, not a contract. She says they're not real lovers. He says it's still similar, that she would be like a concubine. He asks if she didn't think about that before suggesting it. She says she didn't. Then, she asks if they're fake lovers and if she also signed a contract with her husband. He laughs, saying he didn't know writing contracts was the trend these days, but whatever she wants, at least he'll be more useful than a gigolo. He adds that she didn't just bring in any normal lover, he's the most famous one in the capital now. She asks why someone like him would want to do this with her. He says he likes fun things, he already has money, he's the crown prince, and he's tired of all the attention from women. He tells her she can tell him whatever she wants because he could be a very useful chess piece. She says, as you wish. He tells her if she needs time to think, that's fine, but he'll also read the letter she brought. As he goes through them, he wonders why she brought so many documents that are so similar. One of the contracts states that if either of them falls in love with the other, they'll quit the relationship. He tells her he doesn't think she wants a lover for love, since she's been repeating a certain phrase over and over. She tells him it's not because she wants love, but because her husband recommended it. He says, okay, thinking she's a really strange woman. He asks if there's another reason. She tells him she wishes her husband would understand her feelings. He asks if she'd want her husband to be in the same situation. She says yes, and adds that her mother always told her that if fighting is unavoidable, fighting well is just as important as winning. She hopes he'll help her fight well. He tells her there's going to be a banquet this weekend, and Lady Lillian is a rising star in society. He says that Count Laird has been spending time with her lately. He asks if she'd like to start the fight there. She agrees. He then asks if they should plan their first step. She seems surprised and asks, first step? He asks, aren't we lovers anymore? She asks if he really means it. He says yes, but jokes that she's acting way more energetic than he expected, then asks if she's done something like this before. She looks displeased, clearly tired of his teasing. He quickly apologizes and says they should get on with it. He adds that practicing in front of a mirror a few times might help, so it doesn't look too awkward. She leaves after that. Alone, he thinks to himself that she's a funny lady. Just then, there's a knock. It's Max Ion. He lets him in and says he has something to ask, but tells him to speak first. Max Ion reports that there's been some movement from the Emperor's side, that a swordsman competition is being planned and Edward is definitely getting invited. He adds that it feels like an excuse and suspects the Emperor just wants to see his skills again. He asks how long it's been since they returned from peril. He starts thinking that the Emperor's intentions are obvious, either send him out of the capital or get him hurt. Then he casually asks Max Ion when he plans to kill the Emperor, though he guesses it's not that easy, so he tells him to explain more. Max Ion shares that knights from all the top noble families are gathering and it's basically fight or lose your life. The winner gets the prize. He says the prize is the legendary Lencia sword and the Emperor will present it personally. He shakes his head, saying his half-brother must be crazy for offering a royal treasure like that. Max Ion asks if he wants to take some special training. He agrees. No way he's letting that sword end up with someone else. He asks if there's anyone in the capital who can train him since Max Ion clearly doesn't have a teacher vibe. Max Ion says there is someone and admits he's never beaten that guy. That gets his attention. He knows Max Ion earned his title purely through skill, so if someone is stronger, that person's no joke. He decides to use this opportunity to bring that person over to his side and says to introduce him after the banquet. Max Ion agrees. Then he randomly asks if she has any strange tastes. Earlier she told him she couldn't fall in love with him. Max Ion thinks that's normal. But Edward finds it weird. No woman ever says no to him. He sees the expression on Maxion's face and asks what's that about. Max Ion wonders in his head if she can really handle someone like Edward. It's another day. She and Laird are on their way out. She's been feeling awkward around him since visiting Edward's place. She's sure Laird doesn't know where she went. Lost in thought, she doesn't even notice they've arrived at the Heliad mansion. Laird notices something is off and asks if she's okay. Inside, the place is packed. Lady Lillian walks up and thanks him for inviting her. He asks why she's being formal. She says she prepared specially, thinking of him. He tells her he's going to greet some people and says she can leave if she gets tired. She surprises him by saying she's going to enjoy the banquet. He notes how she's been doing things so suddenly these days, then walks off with Lillian. Whispers start immediately. People are wondering why she would come to a banquet thrown by her husband's mistress. Someone even asks if she has no pride. Standing alone, she tells herself that the real battle is starting now and this is only the beginning. Suddenly, Edward shows up. He jokes that her husband disappeared fast today. He hands her a glass of wine and asks if she practiced. She says she even practiced doing things like this. He says great, now it's show time. She asks if this will really work. He says not to worry, his face alone is convincing enough. She agrees, then gently, she drops her glass on the floor. It shatters. Everyone looks over. Edward rushes to her side, acting all concerned, asking if she's okay. He says she's lucky not to be hurt but tells her it's dangerous, so they should leave the crowd. She thanks him for caring. As they walk away, she quietly asks if that was too obvious. He tells her it was perfect, then asks if she can feel it. She's confused. He tells her everyone is staring. He says since all eyes are on them, they need to be fully ready and asks if she's in. She says yes. Suddenly, he raises his voice and asks her to join him in a dance. The whole room goes silent. People are stunned the Archduke is asking Countess Cloette to dance. She accepts. The crowd starts buzzing. Some say they want to watch, some remember they were together at the last banquet too. It turns into the most exciting sight of the evening. As they dance, she tells him she feels like a clown. He tells her to enjoy it. How often do you get a live audience for drama? She says he doesn't seem bothered by any of it. He reminds her again, he enjoys entertaining people. He adds they should really keep selling the story now. Dancing to a slow romantic song in front of everyone makes things clear. She asks what's so clear. He says they look really close now and everyone can see it. She agrees it does look that way. He tells her to stop glancing at other couples and focus on him. Says it's weird that the one asking for help looks less serious than the one helping. Then he pulls her closer so she can feel his breath. She whispers that it still feels strange being this close and looking into each other's eyes for so long. She notices Laird watching them. His expression is off. He's clearly aware of what's going on and doesn't like it. She's surprised. Could he actually be jealous? Edward asks if this isn't what she was hoping for. She admits it is. He tells her the music's ending and whispers that they should keep going till the very end. Meanwhile, Laird is completely thrown off. He starts dragging Lillian along. She asks him to slow down but he's lost in his thoughts, thinking about how Edward tricked her. He remembers them together earlier and wonders why she would agree to go out with him. He tells himself she's not the kind of person to do this, so it must be Edward's doing. He tries to figure out what Edward could be planning. Lillian shouts, asking where he's even going. But he's not listening. He keeps looking at them and watches as they lean in close for what looks like a kiss. He snaps out of it, suddenly apologizes to Lillian, and blurts out that he can't wait anymore to spend the night with her. Then he kisses her. He tells her that from down below, they really do look close. She sniffs the air and realizes he smells like roses. It's the scent of high-quality oil, the kind used for a long time. It's oddly familiar. She remembers how, back at Peril, everything smelled awful. Why she's even thinking about this now, she has no idea. She quickly shifts her focus and asks if her husband might change his mind after seeing all this. He tells her that if today means anything, it's a major win. But in his mind, he still can't figure out what her husband is thinking, doing something like that in public. He asks if she wants to go spy on him. He says that if things change with her husband, it's fine for her to stop coming to him, but for now, they're partners in crime and he's about to do something. She should excuse him. He gently takes off her gloves, says it's just part of the act, and kisses her hand. She's startled, wondering why her heart is racing over something like that. Meanwhile, her husband burns with jealousy. He suddenly tells the lady next to him that they should go to her room. They leave quickly. Back at the balcony, he watches them disappear and says it's over. She warns him that next time, she's not letting go. He chuckles, asking if it's because she's all fired up for him now. She says yes. He then jokes that in the entire capital, no woman really cares for him. If they do, he'd just wrap them around one finger. Not even 3. She snaps back, asking if she's one of those fingers. He smiles and says it's time to escort her to the carriage. She remembers all the rumors back when he was the crown prince. So many women chased him, yet he never got married. She always wondered why. She asked her mom once if he was really that handsome like the stories said. Her mom said he was uglier than sin, just drawn nicely because of his title. Now she knows that was a big fat lie. He's just as good looking as her husband, and if he's this clever with plans, then he's probably had plenty of experience with women. Before she leaves, he tells her that from now on, she should call him by his name. Today, they're making their grand debut as a couple. She gives it a try and says his name. He grins. That day, she rides home in his carriage. The maids who see them are shocked. Whispers start flying. Her husband doesn't come home that night. Days pass. Eventually, he walks into the house, hugs her, says he's tired and wants to rest first. He barely says a word and heads straight to his room. She watches him go and concludes that nothing has changed. Early in the morning, a knock comes at the Archduke's house. It's his knight, holding a letter. He tells the housekeeper he'll deliver it himself. Looking at the envelope, he thinks it's already been 10 days and people are still talking. He hopes she's doing okay. But first, he has urgent matters. He yells the Archduke's name and walks in. The man is deep asleep. He groans, opens the door, and reminds the knight about waking him up so early. The knight says he doesn't look happy and jokes about it. He snaps back, saying of course not, he's been hearing the same gossip for 10 straight days. The knight just shrugs, saying things like that happen. He squints at him, saying he doesn't believe it. When asked what he means, he replies with confidence. There's no way someone could resist his charm. He adds that even his childhood friend pulled off a complicated mission. How could she not fall for him? The knight starts to realize that the real issue isn't that he's hurt, but that he's feeling something unfamiliar, discomfort. He quickly changes the topic and asks if he found a sword teacher yet. The knight says no, but he does have a letter. The Archduke immediately perks up, excited. He says it's not over yet, just like he thought. The knight asks what it says, but he's already caught up reading. He tells him to get a pen right now, he needs to reply fast. He says she's inviting him to visit her at the mansion. He hands over the letter and tells him to deliver it quickly. Then he suddenly asks if he's spoken to her since that day. The knight says no. He meant to explain, but he's not sure how she'd react. The Archduke tells him his judgment has been off lately, but thanks to him, he got what he wanted. He promises to reward him well. For now, he says, he should just go and have a nice, long talk. It begins with Edward, standing just a little too close, casually telling Miss Luise that maybe from Laird's angle below, things might look a lot more intimate than they really are. And well, she thinks he might be right. Her hand rests lightly against his chest, and her thoughts drift oddly not to Laird, but to the soft, floral scent clinging to Edward. It's roses. Expensive, elegant, and strangely familiar. Is it the result of years of bathing in some high-end oil, or is her mind just playing games because she spent too much time at Perril's estate, where every scent was a personal attack? Before she can spiral further, she snaps back to reality and asks Edward the real question: what did Laird think of what they pulled off? Edward says it worked. Judging by Laird's reaction, they hit the target. But even as he says it, he's half lost in his own thoughts. What was he thinking, doing something like that in front of Laird's wife? And why is he wondering if she's even curious enough to come checking on her husband? Laird, meanwhile, is not thrilled. The very idea that Miss Luise is wasting energy on Edward of all people feels absurd to him. Back on the terrace, Edward leans in with another question. What if the Count really does change his attitude? What if after this, she never needs to find Edward again? Is she okay with that? For now, he says, they're just partners in secrets. Which means he has to play his part well. He excuses himself for a moment, and she nods, still calmly keeping her hand right where it was on his chest. Then, without asking, he lowers his head, gently bites off her glove like this is a dramatic play and he's the star of it, and lets it fall to the floor like he's made of slow motion. Luise stares, clearly not expecting that move. He meets her eyes. She smiles. So does he. It's all very unnecessarily romantic. As he kisses the back of her hand like a noble from a painting, she wonders, is this what it feels like when your heart is supposed to skip a beat? Edward isn't exactly being subtle. While he's still holding her hand, he glances over to Laird and Liliana, who are now acting suspiciously couple-like themselves. Laird leans toward Liliana, telling her they should head to her room. He says that no matter how urgent things are, she shouldn't be left collapsed in public. She nods, and they disappear inside together. As the door closes, Edward informs Luise with all the pride of someone who just won a bet, he's gone. Luise warns him not to push his luck. One more move like that, and she won't let it slide. Edward plays innocent, saying he understands maybe she's just excited for him. After all, there isn't a single woman in high society who hasn't fallen for him at least once. He even brags that he could probably wrap most of them around his finger except for 3. She immediately calls him out, saying she must be one of those 3. He grins and says it's a shame. Still, he offers to escort her to the carriage. Luise privately admits he's not exaggerating. Back when he was the crown prince, his face was in every paper, always some new scandal or admirer. It made her curious, so one day, she asked her mother if the crown prince was really that popular. Her mother gave the classic mom answer, he only looks good because he's royalty. Reality's always uglier. But now? Luise knows that was a lie. Looks-wise, Edward is probably the only man in the empire who can compete with Laird. And judging by the way he planned this whole strategy, he clearly knows his way around women too. At the carriage, Edward asks her to stop calling him Your Highness. He wants her to use his name. If they're going to be seen as a couple, they might as well act like one. She agrees and says his name Edward just once. And that's how it ends. That evening, Luise rides home in Edward's carriage, while a few sharp-eyed servants sneak glances and whisper among themselves. Laird doesn't return home that night. A few quiet days pass. Then the door opens, and there he is, calm, unreadable, exhausted. Luise greets him by name, but all he says is that he's tired. He needs rest. They'll talk later. No emotion. No hint of anything. Just a worn-out man heading straight to his room like the past few days never happened. Meanwhile, in another part of the estate, one of the staff notes Maxion's early arrival. He says he'll take the letter upstairs himself. He doesn't speak a word as he walks, but his eyes stay fixed on the note. It's from someone close. 10 days have passed, and things are still noisy. The writer hopes Luise is all right. He mutters to himself that they've got more urgent problems to solve before worrying about that. Then he heads straight to Edward's room and bangs on the door. Edward! Edward Lindemann von! The door opens. The man inside glares. He reminds him, not so gently, to never call him by his full title. He asks what's going on. It's early. He says his face looks different. Edward fires back, hasn't he heard? He's been in a scandal for 10 whole days. It's exhausting. Maxion says things like that happen. Edward asks if he doesn't believe it. Maxion doesn't answer right away. Then, he wonders aloud, did Edward ever consider that maybe this time, he's actually different? He says Maxion's childhood friend went through all that effort. How could Luise not fall for him? Maybe that weird ache in his chest these past few days wasn't heartbreak, maybe it was just jealousy. Edward doesn't respond. The silence says enough. But he snaps out of it and asks what's really going on. Why all the drama first thing in the morning? Has he at least found a swordsmanship teacher? Edward says no. But he hands over a letter. From Luise. And just like that, Edward brightens. She wrote back. That means it's not over, he knew it. He doesn't even read the whole thing before he turns and asks for a pen. He needs to reply immediately. Some things, after all, can't wait. Miss Luise sends a letter, politely asking if she could visit the mansion soon. Maxion receives the response not long after, and is immediately told to send it off. There's no room for delay, so he gives a quick nod and heads out to deliver it. Before he gets too far, Edward glances over and casually asks if he's spoken to Luise since then. Maxion freezes for a second. The memory comes back fast, Luise leaning in, whispering something outrageous about Dolores in having the best gigolo named Maxion. Not exactly the kind of thing someone forgets over tea. Still, he answers honestly, no, he hasn't. He meant to, but he's not entirely sure how she'd react now. Edward seems to catch on, but doesn't press. He simply says Maxion has completed what he set out to do, and since the goal's been met, he'll be rewarded. All he asks in return is for Maxion to finally have a proper conversation with her this time. Maxion nods, giving a short, yes, sir, like he's about to head off to battle. When he delivers the letter, Luise reads it with a little smile tugging at her lips. She tells him it's a good plan, then gives him a look like she's already figured out what he's up to. Maxion admits he thought the two of them might become good friends eventually. But Luise raises a brow. Her voice drops into something a little sharper as she reminds him just how embarrassing that day was. One moment he's wearing a mask, the next, the Archduke appears out of nowhere like the dramatic twist in a theatre play. Maxion apologizes quickly. She lets out a sigh and says it's better to be honest from the start. He agrees, admits he was wrong, and thanks her when she accepts it without dragging it out. She glances at him, her voice softer now. She knows he's been worried about her. He calls her by name, gently. Luise continues, he's probably scared she'll do something reckless again. She says it like a joke, but there's a hint of truth buried in there. She used to be impulsive, the kind who charged straight into trouble without thinking twice. But ever since she found this warm little corner of the world, she's become slower to act. Maybe duller, in her words. Then she changes the subject, asking if he'd like to join her for a cup of tea. He tells her she's still strong. She snorts and shakes her head, but he insists. They share a look, just long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. Luise eventually says there was a time when she thought being young and fearless made her strong. Back then, nothing scared her. But then she found herself in a situation where strength couldn't change anything. That's when she realized she was weak. And it stuck. Maxion listens quietly, then asks her something unexpected. Would she ever consider teaching swordsmanship? She blinks, caught off guard. No one knows she ever practiced, not even her husband. She never told him. She just missed the timing, and now he assumes she's an ordinary woman from the countryside. Her mother always warned her to stay quiet about it, so she did. So the idea of teaching feels far-fetched. Maxion nods, understanding. But he adds that if she ever feels the urge to hold a sword again, she can come see him. That catches her attention instantly. Her eyes light up like someone just handed her a secret invitation. She admits she likes swords. She hesitates for a second, then asks if that would really be okay. He assures her it is. He's staying at Edward's annex, and there's a training ground there. It's quiet, private, nobody would catch her. Luise looks like someone who's just been handed a key to a hidden treasure room and immediately asks if they can go right now. On the way there, Maxion apologizes for not bringing his carriage. She brushes it off. If something strange shows up in the newspaper, all the better, it means the rumors might even reach Laird's ears. They arrive at the annex. He shows her the space, and she looks around curiously. She asks if he's really been practicing in a place like this. Then she walks over and picks up a wooden sword. Maxion tells her it's a beginner's blade and offers to lend her something better, but she says she just wants to swing it once. He watches her closely and asks when the last time was. About 4 years ago, she says. She starts practicing, her movements crisp and clean. For someone who hasn't trained in years, she's remarkably precise. Maxion notices immediately she hasn't lost her touch at all. She pauses to ask if he has any spare practice clothes. He nods and tells her to wait while he reports back to Edward. She agrees, wiping sweat from her brow and looking more relaxed than she has in ages. As he turns to leave, she calls out to him. Her voice is soft, almost hesitant. You told me to raise my sword again, she says. But there's another reason for that, isn't there? He looks back at her, eyes calm. Yes, he replies. Maxion quietly asks if there's another reason behind her decision. She hesitates, then admits there is, him. He's caught off guard, but she doesn't stop there. Apparently, he knew all along that once she held a sword again, she'd think twice about turning down the offer to become a swordsmanship teacher. Maxion tries to play it off, saying that wasn't exactly his plan. He just wanted her to find her smile again, because frankly, she used to like it, and so did he. Still, he can't deny her words aren't completely wrong either. She gives him a soft look and says she understands. Then she thanks him. After all, he's her friend, at least that's the title he's earned so far. But curiosity gets the best of her. She wonders who this mysterious student is he's trying to get her to train. And then it hits her, could it be Edward? Her eyes narrow as she asks if he really wants her to teach Edward swordsmanship. Maxion doesn't say much, just asks her to keep it quiet. Inside though, he's stuck on something entirely different, she just called him by name. That's new. Meanwhile, she's caught in a storm of her own thoughts. Something's off. If Edward really has the skills to return from the dangerous lands of Merrill alive, then why is there even a need for her? No, something doesn't add up. Then it clicks. It wasn't his swordsmanship that saved him back then. Now that she remembers, the wound he got wasn't even that deep, but the bleeding could have turned fatal if it hadn't been treated in time. Someone must have helped him. Or worse, someone might be threatening him. That possibility alone makes her unable to walk away. Maybe it's not that she wants to help, maybe she just hates how uneasy it all feels. Either way, she agrees to become the Archduke's swordsmanship teacher. Maxion's face lights up like someone just told him cake has no calories. It's obvious he's been hoping for this answer all along. She says it with a mischievous tone, admitting that just like the Archduke saw through her but still played along, Maxion is now included in her little prank too. Whether he likes it or not, he's part of the plan. Maxion is stunned, but before he can protest, she leans in and whispers something in his ear. His expression freezes, not from fear, but confusion. Possibly both. Later, inside the Archduke's office, Edward is flipping through a thick book when Maxion casually drops the news that he found a swordsmanship teacher. Edward raises a brow, it's sudden. But Maxion simply suggests they meet at the training grounds by sunset. The Duke doesn't argue. It's not that easy to say no when Maxion uses his "I'll beg if I have to" tone. Convincing Edward hadn't been easy though. Still, the Archduke seems surprisingly free these days, which is rare for someone of his skill level and rank. Maybe he really has cleared his schedule for this. Edward then asks if Miss Luise has replied. Maxion confirms she has. Her answer is on its way. Now that business is handled, Maxion casually asks if he can borrow a few items from the warehouse. Edward barely looks up from his book. He reminds Maxion that he already gave him permission to use anything in the mansion, as long as it isn't alive or breathing. Maxion grins, exactly the answer he wanted. The clothes are sent to Luise, and though the outfit's a bit large on her, she doesn't complain. In fact, she thinks it's much better than some tight, suffocating dress. Maxion, on the other hand, eyes the fit and frowns. He gently pulls the fabric and mumbles that it's too big. He promises to get her something her actual size next time. She thanks him, amused, and tells him again, it's still better than a dress. Without warning, Maxion takes off his jacket and hands her a practice sword. She stares at him, puzzled, but then shrugs. There's still time until sunset, might as well stretch a little. She grips the sword and her eyes gleam. She's missed this. It's been too long since she's held one without the threat of death hanging over her. She warns him not to disappoint her. Maxion shrugs. He's not making any promises. The duel begins and immediately she notices something. He's gotten better. Either that, or she's rusty. His stance is more solid, his movements tighter. He's grown too, both in skill and height. She's mid-parry when she catches herself smiling, and he stares for a moment, trying to figure out why she looks so pleased. When they finally stop, both are out of breath but satisfied. She compliments him. He's improved. He thanks her but can't help thinking that despite everything, he still couldn't land a clean hit. She's still ridiculously strong. She admits the practice makes her feel like they're kids again. He nods, quietly agreeing. It's strange how nostalgia can sneak up during sword practice. Then, like her stomach just remembered it exists, she feels a pang of emptiness. Something doesn't sit right. It's almost like everything that's happened so far has been a dream, unreal and blurry. She glances at Maxion and compliments him again, though this time there's a hint of concern. Even with his progress, she doesn't think it's enough to last a year at Ferial's. That forest is no joke. She asks if anyone in his unit is good enough to protect him. His answer? A simple no. But then he reminds her, he survived that place for a year, didn't he? But the more he talks, the more it sounds off. He says the forest has changed. It's not the same place she remembers. Which, in her mind, only proves it. Something's definitely wrong. The forest looks nothing like she remembers. Its colors are dimmer, the trees hollow in ways they shouldn't be. The forest has changed, she says, almost to herself, fingers brushing the forest floor as if trying to connect with what's left. He confirms it with a quiet nod. She knows deep down, this isn't sudden. It's been dying slowly. And somehow, she was the first to turn her back on it. At the time, all she wanted was to chase the light outside the forest's edge. Something brighter, bigger, more alive than this heavy, old world. She didn't think about the consequences then. Now she wonders, could she have stopped it? Or is it foolish to think she ever had that kind of power? Maybe it's arrogant to believe that returning will fix anything. She doesn't know. All she can do now is hope it's not too late. He informs her the Archduke is on his way, which snaps her back to reality. No time for regrets, there's business to handle. She tells Maxion to get ready, voice firm like someone who hasn't just been mourning a dying forest. Soon enough, the Archduke arrives, eyes landing immediately on the masked figure standing at the center of the courtyard. He arches a brow, puzzled. That must be the new swordsmanship instructor? He's suspicious. Earlier, he had questioned Maxion about the new hire, wondering how good this mystery teacher could be. Now he's standing here, staring at someone clearly not what he expected. The instructor is small. Slim frame, mask hiding most of the face, and, hold on, is that silver hair? His expression betrays the exact thought, is this some kind of joke? She notices, of course. He looks disappointed, she thinks. Probably because she's a woman. Well, too bad. She tells him to pick up a sword, and though he hesitates for a second, he agrees. Internally, he's panicking a little. Should he act like he doesn't recognize her? Because behind the mask, he knows exactly who this is. That voice, the hair, the posture, there's no mistake. It's Luise di Cloet. Once seen, never forgotten. She doesn't wait around. She critiques his posture like she's been waiting years to do it. He, meanwhile, is still trying to wrap his head around what kind of setup this is. No way Maxion pulled this off alone. This has revenge written all over it, sweet, elegant revenge for that day. Luise is in no mood to coddle anyone. She eyes the Archduke, ready to see how skilled he actually is, or isn't. She gives him a simple command, attack. He looks at her, then at Maxion, silently begging for an escape. Maxion, of course, just shrugs and tells him to go along with it. Some friend. Still frozen, he asks himself if he somehow offended her without realizing it. Because this feels personal. Luise points out his grip is completely wrong and suggests maybe he's just ignoring her. He insists he isn't, but she simply tells him to get on with it. He hesitates again, trying to figure out the best approach. Attack her gently? No, she'll call him out for going easy. Go too hard? What if he actually hurts her? No, no. This is the worst possible scenario. It's like being dared to slap a lioness in the face. He finally opens his mouth and asks, shouldn't she at least have a sword too? She tells him not to worry. Just come at her. She'll dodge everything. He stays silent for a beat. Decides to attack, but just a little. A gentle swing. She avoids it with annoying ease and tells him to go again. He thinks maybe he just missed, maybe it was off by an inch. She tells him if he can land just one solid strike on her sword, she'll take off the mask. Now that's motivation. He admits to himself that he was too slow, afraid of hurting her. If he delays any longer, she really might get hurt, like his ego. He steps forward, strikes again. Misses. She says it again, try harder. Now he's thinking, okay, I definitely missed on purpose that time. He takes a breath, aims properly this time, not at her, just at the sword. If he hits the top cleanly, no one gets hurt, right? He swings. She dodges like she's floating. Again, she tells him. He's starting to realize something. Something very, very wrong. He thought she'd be decent. He thought this would be over fast. He thought this was a joke. It's not. Maxion, likely enjoying every second, lights up the arena with a magic glow. The Archduke glares at his friend. Really? Mood lighting? Luise calmly reminds him neither of them is sleeping until he hits her sword. His silence is answer enough. He grits his teeth and finally lands a blow. The moment the blades connect, she pulls off the mask. There she is. Luise di Cloet. Face calm, gaze sharp, not a hair out of place. Ready to be serious now, she asks, like she hasn't just been dancing around his attacks like it was a morning stretch. The Archduke exhales slowly. Then, a smile tugs at the corner of his lips. He admits it, he didn't know Luise was this good at swordsmanship. Looks like he's found himself a very dangerous teacher. And now, unfortunately, he's stuck with her. Luise freezes for a moment, not because she's afraid, but because she's surprised. She expected shock, maybe even denial, but the man in front of her just looks amused. The Archduke, Edward, tilts his head, eyebrows raised like he's waiting for her to catch up. He asks if she really thought he wouldn't notice. She blinks, then asks if she showed off that much. His answer? A little. Then, with a tone somewhere between apology and laughter, he admits he misjudged her back at the inn. Thought it was just some over-the-top revenge moment, like she was trying to win the Drama Award of the Year. Luise doesn't deny it. It was close to that. But Edward, despite the smirk on his face, is thinking something else entirely. Internally, he's baffled. Count Cloet has a wife like this, a woman who can heal fatal wounds and swing a sword like it's a hairpin, and he's still off having secret meetings with someone else. Is that man okay? Like, mentally? Edward wonders if Count Cloet's trying to unlock immortality. Or maybe he already has. Who else cheats on a woman who can possibly bring him back to life just to finish him off again? Luise breaks his train of thought by suggesting they try something new, something they've never done. But Edward pauses. There's one thing bothering him. He gently calls her name and asks, does her husband really not know about any of this? The healing, the swordsmanship? She hesitates, then answers quietly, no, he doesn't. She's a healer. And yes, she knows how to fight. But she never had a reason to show it. He asks why she hid it. But she says she didn't mean to. There was no grand plan, no secret double life. Their marriage wasn't some deep love story. Laird wanted a noblewoman who could boost his image, and the timing just worked out. Once she started living as a noble, her sword and her skills had no place. And, well, she was never the kind of woman a man like him wanted. So, she stopped being that version of herself. Except for Max Ion, no one knew. Not a single soul. Edward hums, a bit more seriously now. He says that makes him the first person in the capital to know her secret. She nods. He tells her he'll keep it. She asks him to protect it, and he agrees. She's not ready to put out a flyer that says healer with a blade, ask for Luise. She starts to bring up something from the past, about when she last treated him, but before she can finish, Maxion's voice cuts in like a knife. Secret treatment. His eyebrows twitching, and it's not from confusion. Edward glances over at Max Ion, then shrugs. Might as well let him know. They're all tangled in the same knot now. So, Luise explains how she saw Edward the day before the banquet, bleeding in a warehouse like someone had tried to turn him into Swiss cheese. She treated him, nothing big. Max Ion frowns. Suddenly, it makes sense, he did hear someone mention the Archduke got unusually high-grade medical attention. And shortly after that, Edward told him to dig into Luise. It's all clicking now, and Max Ion doesn't seem thrilled about being the last to know. Edward claps once, cheerful and unbothered. Dinner, he says, casually pretending this wasn't just a dramatic reveal. He turns to Luise and wonders out loud, could the three of them actually get along? Luise looks at both of them. These are the only two people who know who she really is. And strangely, that doesn't scare her. It feels lighter. Like she can finally breathe a bit easier. She smiles and says yes. Edward leans in, raising a brow. Is she really going to keep calling him Your Highness? He tells her to drop it. She's his teacher now, technically, she outranks him. Just call me Edward. And like that, their first lesson wraps up. 10 days pass. 3 maids stand near the entrance of the annex, their backs straight but their curiosity very bent. When Luise walks past, they bow politely, but they're whispering the second her back's turned. It's been 10 days, hasn't it? One asks, eyes wide. The other nods with a scandalous little gasp. His Highness hasn't left the annex once. The third one just sighs dramatically. Do you know how many tongues the servants are biting trying not to gossip? A whole secret romance is blooming in there. It's torture. Inside the annex, Edward's already in motion. Shirt clinging to his skin, sword swinging with practiced grace. Luise steps in and blinks. Was she early, or was he just extra motivated today? She comments on his outfit well, lack of it, and tells him it's kind of rude to greet someone like that. He says the sun just got hotter than expected, but if it bothers her, he'll go change. She waves it off. It's normal during training, even though, in her head, she's wondering why this feels different. She's seen Max Ion like this dozens of times and never once got flustered. So why now? She watches his form for a moment, then comments that his basics are finally solid. It used to be a disaster, but now he's improved. She even teases that he must have had a very competent teacher. He beams like she just handed him a medal. She tells him that starting tomorrow, Max Ion will be stepping in as his rival. He nods, but she quickly adds, does he know how people are looking at them? Servants whisper every time they pass back and forth between the annex and the training hall. And because the area's been restricted for privacy, it's made everything look 10 times more suspicious. Like a forbidden romance brewing in plain sight. Edward smirks. When you put it that way, it does sound pretty spicy, he jokes. Then he adds, wasn't that the point? She did sign the contract to make it look exactly like that, right? She sighs. It's not a problem, she says. But her thoughts drift elsewhere. She remembers a night at home. Laird stumbled in, clearly drunk. He called her name, Luise, my Luise, like they were still living in some fantasy version of their marriage. She told him he sounded drunk, which he was, but that didn't stop him. He said he broke up with Liliana, said she wasn't a good fit after all. Then, in a messy whirl of emotions, he asked if Edward was a better fit for her. After all, she's been going to the Archduke's place a lot lately. She said nothing. He asked again. Why wasn't she answering? Then, out of nowhere, he kissed her forehead and pulled her into a hug. Told her it was fine. That he was glad she had someone to talk to. That she should continue seeing Edward if she wanted. That she could leave the house, even invite the Archduke over. Do whatever you want, he said. Back in the present, Luise snaps out of it as Edward calls her name again. He raises an eyebrow and asks what she's thinking about, especially when her student is right in front of her. Is she really that bothered by the servants' gossip? She shakes her head. It wasn't about them. She was thinking about something else. Then, casually, she mentions the sun's been strong lately. She might need to get some new clothes. Edward hums, thoughtful. That's so, he says, then stretches out his hand toward her. In that case, let's try this outdoors. She squints at him. Try what outdoors? He grins. A date. Let's go shopping for summer clothes tomorrow. And just like that, sword lessons start turning into something far less formal. Edward casually throws out the idea of taking Luise on a date, but of course, in the most Edward way possible, by insisting he'll buy her a new practice uniform. She immediately waves him off, saying that's unnecessary, but he smiles and tells her not to refuse. After all, isn't he her student and her lover now? It's great seeing her every day at the mansion, sure, but showing a bit of friendliness in public wouldn't hurt either. Luise tilts her head, nodding, it does make sense, in a weirdly formal and romantic kind of way. They walk side by side down the cobbled path. She throws him a look and asks if he was just planning to skip his sword practice today. Edward chuckles, not even bothering to deny it. But she's not letting him get away. Nope. She announces that today, she'll deal with him using only one hand. So he better do his best. He mock salutes with a grin, replying, yes, master. They arrive at the boutique, one of those places where a handkerchief costs more than a week's groceries, and Filio, the flamboyant designer/gossip sponge, nearly drops dead on sight. His eyes sparkle with the kind of drama reserved for opera finales. He can't believe this is happening before his very eyes. Edward, the infamously untouchable male lead, has brought a woman here. A living, breathing woman. And not just any woman, but this woman. Edward lounges in a chair, sipping his coffee like none of this is new. Filio fans himself dramatically, saying he used to think the gossip magazines were exaggerating, but maybe not. He even confesses that, for the longest time, he suspected Edward was gay. With Max Ion constantly trailing behind him like a dark, silent shadow, Filio had mentally prepared for a "we're more than friends" announcement. He even had a couple suits picked out in his mind. Edward nearly chokes on his coffee. Filio, clearly enjoying this, says it's a good thing Edward left the imperial family, though he accidentally slips up and calls him Your Majesty before correcting himself. Edward raises a brow and tells him he hasn't changed a bit. In the middle of all this, Filio dramatically thinks, of all the women in the Empire, the first one he brings is a married countess. Is this Edward's type? But Edward, cool as ever, simply shrugs and says he's discovering some preferences he didn't even know he had. Filio gasps, this is turning into a psychological thriller at this point. Then Luise walks out from the dressing room. And every single jaw in the boutique drops. She's wearing a sharply tailored men's outfit, styled with grace and a quiet confidence that makes everyone pause. Edward stunned. Filio spiritually ascending. Edward tries to play it cool and says, I guess that's my taste now, which makes Luise burst into laughter. Filio, meanwhile, is having an internal fashion crisis. She walked into a shop full of stunning gowns, jewels, and silks, and chose a men's suit. Is this how fashion history is made? But ever the professional, Filio recovers. He tells them he'll alter the men's line to fit her body perfectly. This is a challenge, and a chance to destroy his own bias. Edward, clearly enjoying himself, tells Luise to pick more clothes. In fact, why not just buy the whole collection while they're at it? She quickly tells him there's no need for that, but Filio adds that Edward pays enough to buy the boutique itself. So, I might as well? Edward smirks and says it's been a while since he actually liked something, and that makes Luise laugh again. Luise, trying to be reasonable, says it's all a bit too extravagant. Edward casually shrugs and replies that today's spending could cover the costs of 10 territories. She says that sounds like a waste, and he smiles, saying waste and extravagance are practically his hobbies. She stares at him like he's from another planet. Then, as if offering a compromise, he suggests they look at some dresses too. After all, they'll be attending a prom eventually, so it makes sense to grab a few options now. And since he's already paying, it's even practical. She squints at him, because somehow he made that sound reasonable. Filio jumps in, gleefully announcing there are so many pretty things in the back. Luise blinks at the strange items laid out before her. Dresses, skirts, lace, it's like stepping into a pastel dream. She hesitates, and then shyly asks if Edward could choose for her. She admits she only wore what her husband Laird picked in the past, so she's not sure what suits her. Edward's answer is simple: she should wear whatever she finds pretty. If she asks for his opinion, though, she might not get much help. She asks why, and he grins, saying his taste kind of matches what she's already wearing. She raises a brow. Is he joking? But he looks serious. Then, in a small moment of unexpected tenderness, he reaches over to button the sleeve of her shirt, noticing she struggles with small details. His fingers move gently, and she finds herself watching his face. He's focused, calm, delicate. Their eyes meet. She quietly thanks him, then pulls her hand away, flustered. Her heart skips, and her mind is racing. Why am I like this? What's wrong with me? He calls her name softly, but she's still stuck in her own thoughts, wondering why her chest feels so light and heavy at the same time. Luise eyes the rows of dresses, her fingers brushing lightly over the fabrics. After a bit of browsing, she announces that she'll go try one on and turns to Filio, asking if he can help her pick something. Filio, ever the accommodating one, nods with a smile. Edward, meanwhile, looks genuinely taken aback by how naturally she's acting. Filio mentions they'll send her selected items directly to the palace and casually invites Edward to visit again. Edward chuckles, remarking that now that Filio knows his taste, he expects him to handle all his future designs. Luise laughs along as they walk off together. She thanks him, promising she'll wear the outfit proudly and not waste a coin of it. He simply says he's glad she likes it. As they stroll, she suddenly wonders aloud if she looked a little odd back in the boutique. He doesn't answer, maybe wisely. Not far from the shop, they see a crowd gathered, people craning their necks and whispering among themselves. Luise tilts her head. What's going on over there? The moment they get closer, the whispers grow louder. Isn't that Madame Cloet and Archduke Lindemann, someone says. Another chimes in, they're out on a date, just like the newspaper said. A third adds with a dramatic sigh, TSK, nobles are always entangled in something scandalous. Neither of them responds, they just smile and keep walking, the crowd parting as if someone yelled, "Make way for lovebirds." Though, maybe the real reason is simply curiosity mixed with a dash of gossip fever. Some onlookers even murmur that Edward actually suits her better than anyone expected. Then a town crier's voice rings out, breaking the tension. An official announcement has been released for the Imperial Swordsmanship competition. Luise perks up. Edward, scanning the proclamation, mumbles, an oracle announcement. At an award ceremony. She turns to him, asking if it's important. He nods, a little more serious now. The imperial family hasn't released an oracle in years. It's been so long, it's practically historical. Luise mutters that maybe they finally realized they have no clue what's happening across the country. She did hear some rumors about that before coming to the capital. But Edward can't help thinking, is this a coincidence or a very strategic move? He's suspicious. But Luise, seemingly ignoring his inner spiral, casually throws in, "Isn't the winner getting Lencia's sword?" His eyes narrow. "Why are you asking?" She grins. "Just curious. I've only read about it in books." He internally mutters that Lencia's feet are plastered everywhere. There's barely a street corner that hasn't heard of her. But would even Miss Luise be surprised to see it up close? Luise echoes what she's heard, that Lencia's sword is considered an imperial treasure. Edward glances at her, thoughtful. They climb into a carriage, and once settled, she looks at him and asks if anyone can participate in the competition. He goes quiet, then asks cautiously, "Are you planning to join?" She laughs it off, "No, just curious again." He explains that there are no restrictions, status or gender, none of that matters. The whole point is to find the most skilled fighter in the Empire. Still, he warns that with all the gossip about their relationship, if Countess Cloette were to suddenly debut in a national sword competition, the rumors would catch fire. He admits he's been criticized plenty himself, but somehow, together, they've started to look like a matching set. Luise insists she really was just asking. But in her mind, she can't help but think it must be exhausting for Edward. There's also layered, an unspoken complication. She tells him that, in a way, this is like a special training arc for him too. He agrees with a small smile. Later at Edward's mansion, he flops onto his bed dramatically, a hand pressed to his chest like he's auditioning for a tragic play. "This muscle pain might last a while," he mutters, wincing. But in his heart, he knows he has to win. Though, strangely enough, Luise seems more eager about that sword than he is. Almost like Lencia was her childhood idol or something. Was that what it was? His mind drifts back in time, to a much younger version of himself. He remembers whispering quietly, "If I could someday regain my honor, even after everyone forgets me, that'd be enough." He once dreamed of being emperor. Not anymore. In that same memory, he recalls being introduced to his new swordsmanship teacher, Lencia, the Dragon Slayer. Just the name made his eyes widen. Even more shocking was how much the prince seemed to know about her. Of course, he'd said proudly, "There's a tiny statue of you in the training hall." Lencia's subordinate soon bowed out, and she was left alone with young Edward. She handed him a wooden sword, clearly expecting hard work, not fanfare. Edward had secretly hoped for something cooler, like maybe a fire spell or a dragon head popping out of the sword. But no, she made him do repetitive drills. The young prince whined internally. Wasn't she supposed to show him something amazing? She suddenly asked why he even wanted to learn. His answer was automatic, because he was the crown prince. What prince didn't learn swordsmanship? She stared at him, unimpressed. So, not because you want to. Just because you have to. He nodded. Then she randomly asked if they could play. "You're my sword instructor," he protested. But Lencia waved it off, saying she didn't study hard when she was little either. At his age, just doing something was good enough. He wanted to argue, but he didn't. During outdoor class 1, she declared nap time. In outdoor class 2, they just chatted. He confessed he liked having fun, but what if that turned him into a weak emperor? Lencia reassured him. As long as he had the basics down, he'd improve fast. He frowned, accusing her of not teaching him seriously. What if the emperor fired her? She just laughed. Perfect. I haven't seen my husband and my bunny-like child in a month. That was not the response he expected. He blinked. You have a kid? She nodded and leaned in. Promise me something, she said. If one day my daughter meets the crown prince, let her live however she wants. Don't force her to be something she's not. Don't call her if she doesn't want to come. He blinked again, unsure what to say. Eventually, he nodded, promising to respect her daughter's choices. She smiled, then added, "She looks just like me, you know." He paused, now a little flustered. What if I find her too beautiful to let her go? He thinks. But he doesn't say that aloud. Because not everyone is on his side. And maybe that's the most frustrating part of all. Lencia informs the crown prince that it's their last class. He blinks in surprise and jokingly asks if they've finally been caught playing around by His Majesty. She simply nods, confirming that their little escapade has reached its end. He wonders aloud what a poor royal like himself is supposed to do. Looks like they can't play anymore. Her silence says it all. Not long after becoming his instructor, Lencia had left the imperial castle early, just like she wanted. When the prince had said goodbye, she told him it was time to return to her peaceful life, where a husband and child, sweet as a rabbit, were waiting for her. The official reason? His swordsmanship wasn't making much progress, but in truth, the basics had improved significantly, something the emperor, ever clueless, completely failed to notice. Back then, the prince had accepted it with quiet dignity. Lencia had always been an unusual woman. Not just any dragon-slaying heroine, she was someone oddly determined to escape the grasp of the imperial family. It had been so long that he could barely picture her face anymore. Still, for reasons even he doesn't fully understand, he feels the urge to keep a promise he made, to give someone else a chance to learn. Miss Luise, for example, seems interested in swords. Perhaps arranging a meeting wouldn't be such a bad idea after all. Now, back in the present, the palace is hosting a gathering. Luise offers the male lead a polite smile. He raises a brow and asks if that was supposed to be a smile. She admits it's the best she can do. Public events are not her thing. A group of young ladies nearby gasp as they spot the Grand Duke. One of them excitedly greets Luise and says she's glad to finally speak to her instead of just admiring her from behind. Luise laughs and agrees, might as well make eye contact from time to time. Just as the atmosphere gets lively, Edward, the male lead, cuts in and says it's time to head to the garden. The ladies giggle, teasing that they must be interrupting something romantic. As they walk off, one of them can't help but whisper how powerful the Archduke looks. No kidding. Luise sighs as she walks beside Edward. She's been saying hello to people non-stop, it feels like a royal greeting marathon. Edward smirks and asks if she's finally realized the truth, they're the palace's most talked about adulterous couple. Apparently, they've been receiving invitation after invitation lately. Luise never imagined she'd earn that kind of title, but Edward encourages her to enjoy it while it lasts. When else would she get to star in society's favorite scandal? As they wander into the maze garden, Luise looks around in awe, it's even bigger than the last one. She jokes that if someone got lost in here, they'd never find their way out. Edward shrugs and says getting lost together would only add more spice to the rumors. Perfect! They spot another couple in the distance, and Edward notes that they're not the only one sneaking around. Luise, observing the path ahead, finds herself reflecting. Ever since she began attending balls with Edward, she's been learning about all these discreet, secret corners of every noble mansion. Apparently, there's always a hidden place meant for private arrangements. And now, she's oddly used to it. When did that happen? Her thoughts wander back to her former husband, Laird. He used to hang around the garden too, usually with a small fan club of women trailing behind him. He'd even brought his newest mistress to a ball recently, though he never once glanced in Luise's direction. She remembers wondering whether he'd show even a hint of jealousy. Spoiler, he didn't. He seemed entirely preoccupied with his latest guest, leaving Luise feeling a little foolish for expecting anything else. As she slips into her thoughts, Edward notices and softly calls her name, snapping her out of her daze. Nearby, Laird and his mistress approach with perfectly timed smiles. The mistress greets everyone warmly, as if they're all the best of friends. Laird gives Luise a casual hello, claiming he didn't greet her earlier because the moment hadn't felt right. Sure, let's call it that. The mistress mentions she's visiting Laird's mansion this weekend and casually invites Luise to join them for a meal. Then, with a not-so-subtle smirk, she suggests it'll be fun to hang out often. Apparently, hosting joint dinners is the latest trend in flaunting. Luise smiles politely, but inside, she's questioning everything. Why do Laird's mistresses always act like they're in a royal fan club? Everyone seems eager to dine together and parade their new romance. Once, Luise thought avoiding those dinners would make her look weak. Now? She simply wants no part of it. Still, she remembers that Edward has an annex. She could stay there to avoid the awkwardness. But the idea of sleeping in the same house where Laird's mistress would be spending the night, that's a level of discomfort even palace walls can't contain. Edward, ever the opportunist, chimes in and says the couple's dinner idea sounds great. Why don't the four of them eat together? Laird's mistress beams, calling it a couple's date. Laird, smug as ever, reminds Luise that she's free to do as she wishes. Then he asks her opinion. Luise meets his gaze and calmly replies that she's already invited Edward over on Sunday. Wouldn't it be charming to all eat together? She adds that Laird will surely be seeing Edward quite often. Laird chuckles at that and agrees to the plan, saying he'll see her at the weekend gathering since they likely won't run into each other before then. As Laird and his mistress walk away, Edward turns to Luise, visibly impressed. That was a bold counterattack, he says. Luise admits she's nervous. Did she go too far? Did she play it right? She thanks Edward for backing her up and confesses she's still a bit uneasy. Originally, she thought of taking refuge in his annex, but Laird's mistress will probably be there too, creating an atmosphere she really doesn't want to be around. The idea of Laird cozying up with someone else under the same roof as her? It's painfully ironic. Edward, amused, mutters that it sounds worse than one of those over-the-top melodramas. And then, with a mischievous smile, he casually suggests they could even the score. If Laird's doing that, why not them? Luise blinks at him, taken completely off guard. Did he just say what she thinks he said? He flashes a teasing grin and asks again, would she like to spend the night with him? Luise stands there, absolutely floored. At the dinner table, the atmosphere is unusually lively. Laird's mistress, with her usual flair, keeps the conversation flowing between sips of wine and playful glances. She's chatting comfortably with the Archduke, clearly enjoying herself, while Luise watches the scene with a bit of disbelief. For someone who's never been involved in a scandal, Laird's mistress seems a little too smooth at this whole flirting game. Honestly, Luise didn't expect this either from her seat. It kind of looks like they're in love. Maybe they really are. And judging by the way they glance at each other like nobody else is in the room, they probably know it too. Then comes the big question. Laird's mistress turns to the Archduke and asks if he has any plans to marry. Luise nearly coughs into her cup. Subtlety clearly wasn't invited to dinner. But the Archduke simply smiles, saying he wants to consider the feelings of someone special first. Someone special, huh? Luise tries not to react, lifting her wine glass instead, but she doesn't get away with it. Laird's mistress notices immediately, asking if she's all right. Luise just laughs it off, though inside, her thoughts are buzzing. In the end, she really came to this dinner. How ridiculous. Laird's mistress keeps the conversation going, complimenting how well they all seem to get along. It's probably meant to be a light comment, but Laird cuts in quickly. He mentions that someone was curious about the garden. But with the rain pouring outside, it might not be the best night for a walk. The Archduke, undeterred, says it's no problem. If he's invited again, he'd like to see it next time. Then, with a look that's far too casual to be innocent, he asks if the Count will invite him again. Before anyone else can speak, Laird's mistress jumps in again, gushing about how she just loves couples dates like this. The Archduke chuckles and adds that while the garden must be beautiful, it probably can't compare to Miss Luise. Luise blinks, unsure if she's hearing things. Is this teasing? Flirting? Mockery? They all seem amused by her reaction, which honestly just makes it worse. She turns to Edward, yes, she's using his name now, and asks if she should join in on the performance too. But her voice is softer, a little sad. There's something she actually wants to show him. Edward, curious, asks what it is. She tells him about the roses. They've started blooming in the garden. The color of them, it keeps reminding her of him. He goes quiet for a moment, then asks if it's really true. She nods. Somehow, it always happens, every time she sees them, he comes to mind. Then he does something unexpected. He asks about the breed. Can she tell him? Because he wants to plant the same rose. That way, if she thinks of him while looking at them, maybe he can think of her too. Luise laughs, the sound soft and surprised, while Laird and his mistress sit back in silence, watching the two of them with unreadable expressions. After a while, Laird clears his throat and asks if they can leave now. It's late, after all. Probably best to head to their room. His mistress agrees quickly, and just like that, they excuse themselves. Luise doesn't say anything, but her thoughts speak louder than words. She really thought she could get through this night without any hiccups. Edward stands and stretches like this is all perfectly normal, then casually asks Luise to show him where his room is. She stares at him. Wait, his room? They walk down the hall, the air quiet. In the room, Edward turns to her and asks if he can spend the night at her mansion. Luise's brain briefly shuts down. Is he planning to sleep here? He points out that Laird's mistress is doing it, so technically it's fair game. She stares at him, not sure whether to laugh or scream. Is he serious? Edward smirks and asks if she's run out of guest rooms. She insists that's not the issue at all. But then he raises an eyebrow and accuses her, lightly, of thinking something strange. Of course, he brings up their contract. Article 3, Paragraph 1, no intimate relationship between them. She assures him it's not like that, though internally she's just thankful someone like him is on her side tonight. It makes things a little easier to bear. As she leads him into the room, she's greeted with an unfortunate view, Laird and his mistress, wrapped up in each other right across the way. She quickly yanks the curtains shut, muttering to herself. This mansion really is too bright. So many windows. She once liked that about it, it was different from Peril, which was always gloomy. Light streamed through this place, making it feel like the future was full of possibilities. Back then, she believed everything ahead was going to be okay. How foolish she was. Just as she's lost in thought, she hears a voice asking who's there. She walks toward it and sees Edward again, standing in the dim hallway. She asks what's wrong, and he explains he can't sleep. The mansion's unfamiliar. Then, a little more cheekily, he says that if she's still awake, maybe they could spend some time together. She reminds him it's late. He agrees, but adds that it's the perfect night to spend with a mistress. She shoots him a look. He's clearly messing with her now. She tells him flat out that she doesn't want their relationship progressing like that. He assures her he knows, but then he steps closer. His voice lowers as he says he's felt someone watching him. Moving around. She narrows her eyes, realizing what he's trying to figure out, whether she and someone else are secretly involved. He continues, saying he'll just go along with the flow tonight. After all, he was invited here as her mistress, his words, not hers. Luise doesn't respond at first, but eventually opens the door wider and lets him in. Once inside, she sighs and mutters that he's dangerous. He chuckles. And when she turns to face him, oh, his shirt is casually half open, and his chest is definitely trying to steal the spotlight. They stand there in silence, just looking at each other. No words. No movement. Just that strange, thick silence that says something is definitely happening here, and neither of them quite knows what to do with it. She turns her gaze away, casually pointing out that the weather's really not ideal for a walk. But before she finishes, he cuts her off, saying he just needs a moment of air. She suggests opening the terrace window instead, problem solved, right? But just as she opens it, he drops a heavy question right behind her. Is that all he is to her? Just a tool to sway her husband? That catches her off guard. She never expected him to ask something like that. She stammers a little, saying she's always seen him as a friend. But he's not buying it. He looks right at her and tells her he knows she doesn't treat her friends like this, distant, guarded. And then he reminds her, almost bitterly, that she held Maxion's hand first. She sighs, finally admitting the truth. Getting too close to him, it makes her feel like she's doing something wrong. Like she's cheating. If her husband suddenly comes to his senses, if he ever does, it would feel like betrayal. But he doesn't let her finish that line of thought. He tells her plainly, there's no guarantee her husband will change his mind just because they don't do anything. And maybe now, she's finally starting to realize that. She doesn't argue. She says she's had fun with both Max Ion and him, and honestly, for now, that's enough. He agrees. If she's satisfied, he won't ask for more. Simple as that. Just then, she swings the terrace window open, and the wind rushes in like it's got a flair for drama. The candle flickers out. They both reach for it at the same time, awkwardly bumping into each other. He leans in, voice softer now, and says maybe, just maybe, if her husband does change his mind and shows up, things might shift. But she immediately shuts that down. It won't happen. Not a flicker of doubt. Still, he tries again, wondering aloud if it's really that strange for married couples to visit each other's rooms. Who knows what could happen on a night like this? It's a little too perfect for trouble. Then, without any filter, he adds that this would be her first time being with another man. She stiffens. And calmly, she tells him it's not going to happen. Not ever. Not since her wedding night with Laird. From that very night, they've never once been alone together like this. He frowns. Is it because of that contract she signed when they got married? No, she replies. It's not about the contract. He sighs. Then what happened? It's far from romantic. There's something bitter in his voice now. She calls his name, then gently asks him to close his eyes. He does. A zip is heard, and she places his hand on the back of her neck. He's startled. There are marks. Scars. She asks him, without asking, what kind of life he thinks she's been living. She admits that if she ever tried to explain it, the words wouldn't even be enough. Sometimes she wondered if Laird reacted that way on their first night because she was hoping for too much happiness. Maybe to him, she was a damaged flower, already wilted before she could bloom. She remembers that night. Laird had held her gently, whispered kind words, told her everything about her was beautiful, and she had believed him. She had been shy, embarrassed even, but he looked at her and smiled. But after that night, everything changed. His hands grew colder. His eyes distant. The sweet words vanished like smoke. All that was left was duty. A night that should have meant something became nothing more than an obligation. Since then, the memory clings to her. Sometimes, she catches herself wondering if her body really is just a flawed flower, one so wrong that even the butterflies avoid it. Edward, who's been listening the whole time, cuts in, frowning. What are you talking about? He tells her she's not flawed, not even close. She shrugs him off, saying it's okay, he doesn't need to comfort her out of pity. She knows that kind of appearance isn't easy to like. He calls her name again, this time more seriously. He tells her that growing up, everything around him was beautiful, people, places, even objects. Everyone said he was becoming shallow, but they put it nicely. Then, as he got older, those things stopped impressing him. His eyes, he says, became too particular. He wasn't interested in just anything pretty anymore, and then, somehow, she happened. He picks up her fallen gown and helps her into it. She sighs, thank God. He just chuckles a little and continues talking, almost absent-mindedly. He says she was the first person he ever thought was truly beautiful, not because she was perfect, but because she wasn't. She looks at him, surprised. She tells him the world's full of beautiful women. Maybe he just wasn't paying attention. Maybe if he'd really seen her wounds, he'd have felt disgusted, just like Laird. He wouldn't have even wanted to touch her. But he doesn't flinch. He grabs her gently and pulls her a little closer. If there's any reason he can't reach her, he says, it's not because of her scars, it's something else entirely. She stares at him. What are you doing? And with a soft, teasing smile, he tells her, they're not supposed to touch each other like that without permission, right? Classic him. If you're excited to see what happens next, leave a comment asking for part 3. Make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. See you in the next one, ciao.